The eruption ended in 17 days, but the data that followed, the data scientists have been collecting every single day since the lava stopped, is what has the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory watching Mauna Loa more closely now than at any point since the eruption itself. On November 27, 2022, Mauna Loa, the largest volcano on Earth by volume, erupted for the first time in 38 years. The eruption shifted from the summit caldera to the northeast rift zone within hours, and lava flows advanced toward the only highway connecting the east and west sides of the Big Island at a rate that put emergency management on high alert. By December 13th, it was over, and then something happened that scientists have been tracking carefully ever since. Within weeks of the eruption ending, instruments beneath the summit caldera began registering signals consistent with the magmatic system starting to recharge. Ground deformation sensors showed the summit beginning to reinflate. Seismicity beneath the volcano's upper edifice elevated above its post-eruption baseline and has not fully returned to resting levels since. The most recent monitoring data published by the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory shows those signals intensifying, placing the current period outside what researchers consider the normal post-eruption resting pattern. By the time we are done here, you will understand exactly what Mauna Loa is, why it occupies a uniquely dangerous position in the American volcanic hazard landscape, what the current monitoring data means, and what the realistic threat looks like for the tens of thousands of people who live directly in its shadow right now. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever been to Hawaii? Have you seen active lava? Stood close enough to feel that heat radiating off the surface? Tell me where you were and what it was like. Those are the comments worth reading. If you want updates every time something this significant happens, subscribe. It is completely free. A thumbs up helps this reach the people who should actually see it. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one. Now, let us get into it. To understand the significance of what the instruments are reading right now, you need to understand what happened on the night of November 27th, 2022, and how fast it happened. At 11:21 p.m., the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory's seismic network registered the beginning of a rapid earthquake swarm beneath Mauna Loa's summit caldera. Within minutes, HVO issued its first eruption notice. By 11:30 p.m., 9 minutes after the first alert, lava was fountaining from fissures on the floor of Moku Aweo, the summit caldera, which sits at approximately 4,170 meters above sea level. The eruption alert level moved from watch to warning, the highest level in the USGS volcanic alert system, in under 30 minutes. The summit phase lasted only a few hours. At 2:30 a.m. on November 28th, just 3 hours after the eruption began, new fissures opened on the upper northeast rift zone at approximately 3,500 meters elevation. Lava immediately began flowing northeast, in the direction of Hilo, the largest city on the Big Island, with a population of approximately 45,000 people. HVO scientists monitoring the flow advance rate began calculating whether lava would reach the Daniel K. Inouye Highway, the only road connecting the eastern and western halves of the Big Island. A lava crossing would have severed the island, blocking emergency access, supply chains, and evacuation routes simultaneously. The flows reached their closest approach to that highway on December 2nd, approximately 2.5 miles short. The advance rate then slowed as the supply channel from the vents decreased. By December 13th, the eruption had ceased. 17 days. Northeast Rift Zone. Lava advancing toward Hilo, stopping 2.5 miles from the critical highway. And then the post-eruption data began accumulating. Since December 2022, HVO has been tracking 3 parameters with particular attention. The first is seismicity. In the months immediately following any volcanic eruption, seismicity typically decreases as the system depressurizes and stabilizes. At Mauna Loa, seismicity did initially decrease, but it did not return to the low resting levels observed during the long, quiet period between 1984 and 2022. It remained elevated, with periodic swarms beneath the summit, indicating ongoing subsurface activity. The second parameter is ground deformation. GPS stations and tilt meters across Mauna Loa's flanks recorded the expected deflation after the eruption. The surface sank as lava drained from the reservoir, but the deflation was followed more quickly than in some previous post-eruption cycles by renewed inflation. The summit is rising again. The magma system is refilling. The third parameter is sulfur dioxide. Volcanic SO2 tracks closely with magmatic activity at shallow depths. Mauna Loa's SO2 output dropped sharply after the eruption, as expected, but recent measurements show episodic spikes above the expected resting baseline, suggesting fresh magma at shallow depth is periodically degassing near the surface. None of these three signals individually constitutes an eruption alert. Together, and in the context of Mauna Loa's historical eruption frequency, they represent exactly the kind of post-eruption recharge signature that precedes the volcano's return to activity. The question is not if Mauna Loa erupts again. The question is which direction it chooses when it does. To understand what Mauna Loa is doing right now, you need to understand what it actually is, because Mauna Loa is genuinely unlike any other volcano on Earth. By volume, Mauna Loa is the largest volcano on the planet. It occupies approximately 18,000 cubic miles of the Pacific Basin, rising from the ocean floor approximately 5 kilometers below sea level to its summit at 4,170 meters above sea level. Measured from its oceanic base to its peak, it is taller than Mount Everest. From space, the big island of Hawaii is essentially a pile of Mauna Loa lava, with a smaller neighbor, Kilauea, attached to its southeastern flank. Mauna Loa is a shield volcano. That classification carries specific implications for the hazard it represents. Unlike composite volcanoes, the cone-shaped stratovolcanoes like Mount St. Helens or Mount Rainier, shield volcanoes produce lava flows rather than explosive pyroclastic eruptions as their primary hazard. The lava is low-viscosity basalt that flows easily and travels fast, but it generally does not produce the lethal ash clouds, pyroclastic surges, or blast events that composite volcanoes generate. The trade-off is coverage. Mauna Loa does not destroy by explosion. It destroys by advancing, inexorably, continuously, across everything in its path. It buries roads. It consumes buildings over days or weeks. It reaches the ocean and creates new coastlines while simultaneously destroying infrastructure that generations built, and it can move faster than most people realize. The Hawaiian hotspot beneath Mauna Loa has been burning through the Pacific Plate for approximately 70 million years, leaving a chain of volcanic islands stretching northwest across the Pacific. Each one an older, eroding expression of the same deep heat source. The Big Island sits directly over the hotspot right now, which is why it is the youngest and most volcanically active island in the chain. Kauai, at the northwestern end of the main islands, is 4 to 5 million years old. The Big Island's oldest exposed lavas are less than 700,000 years old. Mauna Loa's magma system involves a shallow storage reservoir beneath the summit caldera, fed continuously from deeper mantle sources. As magma accumulates in that reservoir, the overlying ground inflates, measurably, detectably, at the millimeter level from GPS stations and from satellites in orbit. When pressure in the reservoir reaches a threshold, magma migrates into one of the two rift zones extending from the summit. The northeast rift zone, oriented toward Hilo, and the southwest rift zone, oriented toward the less populated Cow District and the southern coast. Which rift zone an eruption chooses is the single most consequential variable in Mauna Loa's hazard equation. Northeast rift zone eruptions send lava in the direction of 45,000 people. Southwest rift zone eruptions send lava into largely uninhabited terrain. Scientists cannot yet predict with certainty which zone will activate in any given eruption. They can observe which zone shows higher deformation and seismicity in the lead-up, but the path magma ultimately takes is determined by subsurface geometry that remains incompletely mapped. Two eruptions, same volcano, two completely different outcomes determined by that single variable. The state of Hawaii classifies Big Island volcanic risk through a 9-zone lava hazard system. Zone 1 is the highest risk, on or immediately adjacent to active rift zones. Zone 9 is the lowest, far from any historically active vent. Zones 1 through 6 carry meaningful eruption risk on geologic timescales. Hilo, the largest city on the Big Island, with approximately 45,000 residents, sits in lava hazard zones 3 and 4 across most of its residential sections, closer to Zone 2 in areas near historical flow paths. This is not a city built next to a volcano by accident. It is a city that has grown up in full knowledge of what has historically threatened it and made a generational decision to remain. The 1984 eruption is the most directly relevant comparison. On March 25, 1984, Mauna Loa erupted for the first time in 9 years. The Northeast Rift Zone activated. Over 22 days, lava advanced toward Hilo, eventually reaching within approximately 4 miles of the city's residential edge. HVO scientists were actively calculating whether the flows would reach Hilo. The lava stopped, not because the eruption ended, but because the supply rate from the vents decreased enough that the flow front was cooling faster than it was advancing, 4 miles. At the rates the 1984 flows were moving when they stalled, they were approximately 1 to 2 days away from reaching the city. The 1950 eruption illustrates an entirely different dimension of the risk. On June 1, 1950, a Southwest Rift Zone eruption began at 11:59 p.m. By 2 a.m., lava had already traveled 17 miles from its vent. By 4 a.m., barely 4 hours after the eruption started, lava was reaching the Pacific Ocean. The flows advanced at rates between 6 and 10 miles per hour at peak. They destroyed the fishing village of Ho'okana and covered sections of the coastal highway before the eruption ended 9 days later. At 6 miles per hour, lava covers the distance from a rift zone vent to a coastal road in hours, not days. The warning time available for residents in the direct path depends entirely on where the vent opens, the initial flow direction, and the terrain gradient. For some scenarios, that window is measured in days. For others, it is measured in hours. Hawaii County's emergency management system has improved substantially since 1950. Evacuation plans are in place. The road network remains the binding constraint. The Big Island has limited primary routes in certain areas, and a fast-moving lava flow on the wrong vector can sever options before complete evacuation. These are not theoretical concerns. These are documented events from living memory, and the geological system that produced them is still active and currently recharging. The Big Island's residents who live in higher hazard zones are not uniformed or reckless. Many are generationally connected to land that has been in their families for centuries. The Hawaiian concept of aloha, aina, love of the land, cannot be separated from the volcanic landscape that created and continues to shape the islands. The hazard and the belonging are inseparable in ways that render simple risk calculations insufficient to describe what living on Mauna Loa's flanks actually means. So what exactly are HVO scientists watching now, and what would need to happen for the monitoring status to escalate? Mauna Loa has erupted 33 times since 1843. Roughly one eruption every 5 years on average, with significant variability. The longest gap in the modern record before 2022 was the 38-year pause between 1984 and 2022. Before that, eruptions were more frequent. The 19th century record shows several eruptions per decade in some periods. The 2022 eruption was relatively short and relatively low volume compared to some of Mauna Loa's major historical events. This has two specific implications. First, less magma was expelled from the reservoir, which means the system needs to refill less before it reaches eruption-capable pressures again. Second, a shorter eruption may mean the pressure release was incomplete, leaving the system closer to its pre-eruption pressure state than a longer, larger eruption would have. HVO monitors the following leading indicators most closely. The first is the inflation rate. Current GPS data confirms ongoing inflation. The reservoir is adding volume. If that inflation rate accelerates, particularly toward the rates recorded in the months immediately before the 2022 eruption, it would represent a meaningful escalation signal. Scientists have a documented comparison point from 2022 to reference against. Keep an eye on the depth distribution of seismicity too. When magma moves from deeper storage toward the shallow summit reservoir, it fractures rock as it pressurizes upward, generating small earthquakes whose depths can be precisely located by the seismic network. In the months before the 2022 eruption, HVO recorded a clear pattern of seismicity migrating upward and shallowing toward the summit over several months before the actual eruption onset. If that same shallowing pattern reemerges with sustained intensity, it would be among the most significant precursory signals in the current monitoring cycle. The second major volcanic system in this story is Kilauea. Kilauea occupies the southeastern flank of Mauna Loa's edifice and has been erupting almost continuously since the 1980s, with brief pauses. The two volcanoes share a tectonic setting and the same deep hotspot source, but have separate and distinct magmatic plumbing. Research has documented what appears to be an inverse relationship between their activity levels. Periods of high Kilauea eruptive output have historically corresponded to lower Mauna Loa activity and vice versa. The proposed mechanism involves competition for the same deep magma supply. As Kilauea's eruptive activity evolves in coming months, scientists will be watching whether that pattern holds and what it implies for Mauna Loa's recharge trajectory. What HVO does not have, and what its scientists are transparent about not having, is a reliable model for predicting exactly when the next Mauna Loa eruption will begin. The monitoring is excellent. The precursory patterns from 2022 are well documented and available as a reference baseline. The eruption will almost certainly be preceded by weeks to months of accelerating seismicity and rapid inflation that HVO will detect and communicate in real time through eruption notifications. The uncertainty, and it is a real documented uncertainty, is which rift zone activates. That is the variable the monitoring cannot yet resolve in advance. So let us close what we opened. Mauna Loa is showing signs of post-eruption recharge that scientists consider consistent with a system moving toward its next eruptive period. The ground is inflating. The seismicity has not returned to its long, quiet, resting level. SO2 emissions show episodic signals above resting baseline. These are real, documented, monitored signals, not viral conjecture. A catastrophic, explosive eruption that destroys Honolulu or generates a Pacific-wide mega tsunami is not supported by the science. Mauna Loa is a shield volcano. Its mechanism is lava flows, not pyroclastic columns. Its eruptions are observable, trackable, and in most historical cases preceded by detectable warning signals measured in weeks, not hours. There is currently no elevated alert level at Mauna Loa. HVO is monitoring at its standard baseline. Scientists are watching. They are not alarmed, but here is what is real and what deserves your attention. The most realistic danger from Mauna Loa is not buried in some catastrophic worst-case scenario. It is hiding in a single geographic decision that the volcano will make on its own terms, on its own schedule, without consulting the 45,000 people in Hilo who live downstream of the Northeast Rift Zone. Not if, when. And when the next Northeast Rift Zone event exceeds the 1984 volume and duration, the flow front will move with the same physics it always has. The roads will narrow, the time will compress, and the window for the last evacuations will be measured against a lava front that does not slow for traffic. The Big Island's lava hazard zone maps are public information. If you live there, or if someone you care about lives there, knowing which zone your address sits in is not fear. It is preparation. Zone 1 through 4 residents should have an evacuation route that does not depend on a single road remaining clear. HVO will give the warning. The question is, what communities and individuals are prepared to do with it? Drop a comment right now. Have you been to the Big Island? Have you stood on hardened lava and felt the heat coming through the soles of your shoes? Tell me about it. If this gave you something real, a thumbs up means a great deal. Subscribe for what is coming next. We are going deep on the Cascadia subduction zone, and that one will permanently change how you think about the Pacific Northwest. Let us go. See you in the next one.